John Smither, who's a research director at 2CV, and he's going to be speaking to us. The title of the presentation is Game Changers, a global index of brand performance. And 2CV is the go-to agency for understanding audiences. They have offices in the UK, US, and Singapore, and their mission is simple: to help their clients understand what opportunities are present, how best to move forward, and ultimately how those brands can make their mark. Thank you, Jim.
Okay, so we all know that gaming is big. It encompasses a worldwide audience of casual, hardcore, and sort of semi-light gamers in console, PC, and mobile. It encompasses about half the world's population. And at 2CV, we've been asking ourselves for a long time, well, how can brands actually leverage this opportunity? How can they really engage this diverse global audience? And fundamentally, how can they make their mark with gamers? So back in 2021, we published a report called Gaming Demystified. Now, this was a really comprehensive assessment of the ecosystem, of opportunities for brands, and including some example executions. One of the report authors, Chris, is sat over there, so if you've got questions, do ask him, but it's still really relevant today. And this was research we conducted with senior marketers. And what we found was that actually there's rising interest among senior marketers in investing in marketing in video gaming. It increased from about 59% in 2019 to 86% in 2021. The reason for this is that gaming is seen as an increasingly sound channel. So it's an advertising channel that is innovative, it's relevant, and it's impactful. And indeed, marketers are spending. About 60% of senior marketers in Asia have spent and invested in advertising in gaming because they see it as a way of reaching out to hard-to-reach audiences at lower cost than some traditional channels, and also offering them a higher return on spend. So lots and lots of benefits there. What we found is that knowledge has improved, but it is still lacking. So what we could see in 2019 was that about 1 in 5 said they had strong knowledge of marketing to gamers, which has increased to about 44% a couple of years ago. But there's still this really solid, over half of senior marketers don't have solid understanding of how to leverage that opportunity for their brand. And some of the concerns are around insufficient information about the industry, find the opportunity hard to measure, lack of expertise, and even some potential brand damage when sponsoring gamers. We also saw that there's a significant minority of senior marketers who find the opportunity risky, confusing, or ill-advised. And a lot of clients will come to us because they want to know, okay, so who actually is the audience? What is the potential reach? How should I invest? What are the investment opportunities? How should I measure effectiveness? And what are the potential brand risks? But all this time we were missing a single and important piece of the puzzle, and that was the perspectives of the gamers themselves. So what did gamers think in terms of which brands resonate, which brands are authentically connecting with gamers, and which brands are really sort of doing that effectively? So we've recently developed a new way of measuring brand performance with gamers that we are calling Game Changers. And I should say thank you to our friends at Pure Spectrum, because this study was conducted in partnership with them, with data collected in August this year. We spoke to 3,000 gamers, and these are regular gamers on console PC. We covered 6 markets, and we covered 52 brands. And we asked a very simple question, and that question was, which brands are nailing it with gamers? So we wanted to pick 5 categories that are really ubiquitous, that are really prevalent, that are really common. And from within them, we purposefully chose 52 brands that are well-known, global, worldwide reach, operating in multiple markets. And we looked at 3 key metrics. So those metrics were fame, fit, and fidelity. So how famous is the brand with a gamer? How well does that brand actually fit with gaming? And fidelity was, to what extent is the in-game marketing actually remembered? Is it actually recalled? So we took these three Fs, and along the y-axis, along the side, we looked at fame. So how well known is the brand with gamers? Along the x-axis, we looked at how relevant is the brand to your gamer needs. And then we introduced this measure of fidelity. So fidelity, remember, is the game-related marketing remembered, with a smaller circle representing sort of lower recall, and a larger circle representing proportionately higher recall. We then plotted a grid, and each brand received a unique place on this grid to assess their relative position with gamers. And where brands want to be is in the top right. So they want to be a recognized leader. If you're targeting gamers, you want to be well-known, revered, a sort of iconic symbol of the gaming industry. We also see that there's a lot of brands that have got growth potential. So these are the brands that have strong fit, they're seen as relevant, but they perhaps need to work on their amplification. We also, in the top left, have a bunch of brands who are a little bit out of sync. So they're well-known, they're recognized, but there's potentially a bit of disconnect or a bit of misalignment in terms of the overall fit. And then in the bottom left, we have a series of brands that are a little bit unfocused. So they don't really have strong fit and they don't really have fame. So the question is, are they really operating in the right space when they're targeting gamers? So to begin with, what we want to do is answer which brands are leading the pack. And what we see is that ultimately gaming spend is driving fit perceptions. So those brands that we know are spending heavily on marketing in games, they tend to have an overall stronger relationship with fame, fit, and fidelity. But obviously, at a global level, it's quite hard to make sense of that chart, apart from the fact that we've got lots of big circles in the upright, in the recognized leader space. Now, one of the things to point out is that what I'm going to be talking about today is the global average, and obviously there's a lot of important market nuance between markets. Overall, we see that actually there is quite a lot of commonality with gamers. So brands that are performing well in market, on average, do perform well in others, speaking to that overall global audience. But of course, there's some specific market nuance. So for example, in Japan, Amazon Prime makes it into the top 5. In USA, Monster Energy makes it to number 1. But they're really the only markets where these brands feature in the top 5. So I'll start by talking about the first category, which is financial services. The reason I want to start with financial services is because it's really that category that you wouldn't necessarily associate with gamers. But actually what we see is that those providers of solutions that are easing payment in the digital space, they're really ahead. So PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, significantly over-indexing compared to some arguably more traditional financial services providers. So what are they doing right? So PayPal really had first mover advantage. So, it's a very popular wallet for e-gaming globally. It's integrated into many platforms, PlayStation Network, Xboxes, also have their own series of mini games, and also quite prevalent in sponsoring esports tournaments. MasterCard also has sponsorship of esports tournaments, but it's also been doing a lot to actually ease and make digital payments quite frictionless in the gaming space. So they developed the MasterCard Gamer Exchange, where you can convert rewards into in-game currency, and also lots of other ways of improving digital experiences for gaming payments. And Visa is a little bit similar. So Visa sponsored some esports teams, also created Visa-ready creator commerce, lots of research and targeted efforts to reach gamers, and also through its gaming gift cards. And I think what you can really take away from this is that there's no specific category that is out of bounds for gamers. It's a really relevant audience for lots of different brands and lots of different categories. And the success factor is really how they're executing that strategy. The next category is what goes into gamers in terms of food and drink to actually power their play. And what we see is that soft and energy drinks are really highly aligned. So what you'd expect is kind of reflected in the data. Coke, Pepsi, Red Bull, Monster Energy, Doritos, all enjoying really favorable positions. Prime is an interesting example because it's obviously quite a new brand, but one that enjoys really strong fit with gamers. So you would expect that over time, as the brand continues to amplify, as the brand continues to gain recognition, you'd expect to see it increase in fame. In the unfocused section, you actually see the combination of alcohol and ice cream, which for me is a pretty nice combination, but not so to a lot of gamers, with these brands not really being focused, not really having either strong fit or fame with the gaming audience. In terms of what the brands are doing that's working, obviously these are big global brands with big budgets, and they are aiming them squarely at gamers. So there's lots of interesting and innovative things that these brands are able to do. So just to pick out a few examples, Coke has had a series of limited edition flavor ranges. It's had its XP flavored Coke. It's had its Pixel flavored Coke. Also sponsorship of gaming campuses in Texas, as well as helping to actually develop mobile games and being quite innovative, even back in 2018, sponsoring a virtual footballer in FIFA 18. So, continued efforts to really target gamers in quite novel and interesting ways. Monster Energy also established a really strong position with gamers, so really aligned with gaming culture, established partnerships, sponsorships. I think particularly with games like Call of Duty and Apex Legends, they've really focused on, you purchase a product and then you gain the rewards in-game, whether it's battle passes, whether it's XP, skins, whatever it happens to be, but there's a reward for that external purchase. Red Bull have taken a similar but slightly different approach, actually, and they positioned themselves as an energy drink needed for esports. So they sponsor lots of esport athletes, also developed gaming hubs in Korea, Australia, Ireland, but they also released lots of articles and thought leadership to help their audience actually become pro gamers, so how to be a pro gamer. And these things have really reflected in their overall strong position. In the QSR category, so we see the brands in terms of quick service restaurants. And it's quite interesting here because there's some standouts, but actually they tend to cluster quite similarly near to the sort of average score for fit. And you can see there's a lot of space to the right that they can move to. But I think the brands that have really stood out are Burger King. So they've been doing lots of short-term and long-term activity. They do sponsorship, but they've actually been releasing, developing games as far back as 2006, and the advertising has really been, relevant and resonant with gamers. I think really sort of picking up some of the subcultural cues, some of the comedy. I don't know if you've seen their Glitch campaign. It's worth checking out on YouTube. If you haven't, it's a good one. But they've really sort of been able to pick up on some of the sort of the gaming subculture. KFC is also a good example of brand asset portability. So you can see in games like The Sims, you can go on a date with Colonel Sanders, or in Street Fighter, for a limited time, you could fight as Colonel Sanders, depending on what you wanted to do. They've also had limited edition merchandise, so becoming the unofficial sponsor of the World Cup through their sort of collaboration with SteelSeries and gaming headphones. And also, again, really picking up on the entertainment, the humor, by saying that they were going to release their own version of a console, the KF console, and got a lot of hype, a lot of attention. What it turned out, it was actually an air fryer. So when you open it up, instead of putting a game in, you put your chicken wings in, you keep them warm as you're playing. So really sort of tapping in to the humor in the subculture. The final category that I just want to touch on today is fashion and beauty. And the reason I want to focus on this one is because this is probably the category with the most failure of a strong fit. I think the notable exception is Nike and Adidas. Now, Nike and Adidas are two of the strongest brands overall. So not just within the fashion and beauty category, but actually overall. But you can see all of the other brands that have highlighted from within this category, they're in the red. So they're actually under-indexing. Adidas has been pretty effective in the metaverse. So what we see is that that's not always a recipe for success, but I think the way they did it with sort of Bored Ape and various other collaborations, it supported the brand and it really sort of landed quite well. They've also partnered with Gamers8, so co-collaboration in Riyadh, and lots of innovations around the gamer. So, you know, several years ago, there was a football boot you could buy that had a chip in it. It would actually record your movement. You could then take that back into the FIFA games. So lots of ways of sort of crossing over between the physical, the virtual, to really engage with, you know, particular gaming audiences. But outside of that, many fashion and beauty brands are failing. So across all markets, you can see few are sort of over-indexing on the three measures. Probably the one standout is Vans, H&M also, but Vans is the one that I want to focus on today. And Vans has been one of the success stories of the metaverse. So developed Vans World, which is a brand experience in Roblox. One of the few ones that have actually, you know, been effective, been visited, with about 100 million people having visited Vans World. The collaborations that they've chosen have been quite effective. So with Nintendo, with other sort of retro arcade games, they've fitted their audience. And also some of their Twitch collaborations and YouTube collaborations have also been relevant for the audience. Performance does vary quite widely for some other brands in this category. So although we are looking at global averages, a brand like Uniqlo is a good example. It really performs weakly in the US, in the UK, and India. But actually in Southeast Asia, so Thailand, Indonesia, Japan, it's much, much stronger. And obviously, this is the fact that you can't take the gamer out of the market they're in. But you can see from all the other brands, they do tend to cluster around similar points. So actually, you know, globally, there is some commonality, and generally, with all of these brands, they're underperforming in each individual market. And I think the reason for this is brands have a choice to either go all in with gamers or to cash in. And a lot of brands in this space have really just focused on cashing in. So some of the collaborations tend to be quite high level, quite superficial, just looking at, you know, merchandise, looking at sort of printed t-shirts. It could be with L'Oreal, you're looking at skins that you can apply to your avatars in Ready Player Me. And similar with Levi's, you can dress your dancer in QQ Dance, or with Ralph Lauren, you can dress your racer in Fortnite. But actually, these are all quite high level, quite superficial, and they haven't really landed, they haven't really driven home with gamers. So what do brands, what should they do to actually target gamers? So the first thing is connect with us on LinkedIn, and we can share more. But really, we say you should learn, understand, and respect. So learn the behavior, culture, preferences. It's a diverse group, and you need to understand the industry structure. You can discover, so all of the data today is available. You can learn what works, what doesn't, and you can also assess your own position versus competitors in your category. So a small plug is that we're developing a dashboard. You can log in, you can play around with it, you can filter by country, filter by category, look at the brand index, and also really dive into the different audiences, the different profiles that we have in the different markets. And finally, respect. So be authentic, use the culture for inspiration, and always look to provide value and entertainment. Thank you very much.
The perception might be that gamers are not very economically active. If you take my son, for example, he's spending all his time gaming and not spending. So does this ever come up as an objection, or a downside?
I think in our audience, we're looking at gamers up to the age of 50. So it's not the fact that gamers are, teenagers or unemployed. I think a lot of gamers have got high spending power and are buying brands. So within this sample, we are looking at economically active gamers as well as, future spenders.
But have you quantified the differences between, like, a millennial gamer and a non-millennial gamer, and can you sum up what are the key differences? I mean, it's maybe difficult to sum it up, but are there noticeable differences between gamers and non-gamers of the same age cohort?
Yeah, so this is just a sample of gamers, obviously, but there's different ways of looking at gamers, whether they're light or casual or hardcore gamers. Also, there's generational differences. Also, there's spending differences. So the same with any audiences, there's differences within that. I would say for the deeper cuts, feel free to connect with us, and we can go through the data, because there's so many different ways of looking at it.
How typically, if the brand that is quite far from those kind of connection with the audience, how they can slowly go to like be closer? And yeah, is there any pattern or like, even though it cannot be generalized again, but is there any pattern that you see or like success story from the brand that maybe we used to be before like far away from those kind of community of gamers, but now they become more and more closer? Thank you.
Yes, so it's a great question, and we intentionally chose brands that are non-endemic, and by that we mean those brands that aren't really part of the gaming ecosystem. Now, what we weren't able to do on this occasion was look at new up-and-coming brands or perhaps smaller brands. So because this was a global study, we really wanted to look at those big global brands and then through desk research see what was working and what wasn't working. But as a very sort of general principle, being authentic and understanding the subculture is the key driver for success, because gamers will see through brands that are just doing it superficially very quickly, as shown with a lot of the brands in fashion and beauty.